over 55 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by the Georgia Farm Bureau in association with Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College.
Ray D, Jennifer P, together again. That's always fun, at least for me anyway. Not sure about Jennifer, especially since she has to put up with me.
Stop it. Every show's a fun show. More importantly, though, it's also informative. And this week is no exception. Coming up, weathering the storm. Georgia farmers faced record drought, soaring temps, and devastating hurricanes in 2024. But what can they expect in 2025? Also on the program, a trip to Savannah for an inside look at Georgia's thriving fruit and vegetable industry, where staying ahead in this ever-evolving field is key. Plus,
well, hey everybody, Ranger Nick. Coming up a little bit later, we're talking about another kind of crop this month, the crop of trees, and I'm hanging out with a logger that's going to explain how logs are graded, put onto that truck, and shipped out of here all over Georgia. That and so much more starts right now on the Farm Monitor.
with rising temperatures, severe drought, and 2 hurricanes rolling through Georgia in 2024, Mother Nature provided plenty of challenges for producers here in the state. Damon Jones tells you if those conditions are expected to improve in the coming year and what farmers can do to adapt.
No matter how much time, money, and effort farmers put into growing their crop, they are ultimately at the mercy of the weather. And in 2024, it provided more downs than ups, especially with Hurricane Helene causing more than $6 billion worth of damage to Georgia's agricultural industry. And even though another active storm season is forecast in 2025, growers shouldn't be alarmed just yet.
Just because it's active doesn't mean it's going to have any impacts on Georgia, because we don't know where those storms are going to go. Some years they go to Texas, some years they go more up the East Coast. And this is a pretty unusual year that Georgia doesn't often have 2 big storms that come over the state, especially the same part of the state, in one year. And so it's not likely that we're going to see another year like that next year. Even if it is active, there's no guarantee they're going to come over Georgia.
Another major problem most of the farmers in Georgia faced was record drought conditions in a number of counties around the state.
But if you took the tropical rain away, almost the entire state would have been below normal in precipitation. And in areas that didn't get hit by the tropical storms, it was quite dry, and we'd see drought expanding. And so I know people in areas that did not get hit by the tropical storms were really frustrated because it was so dry that the crops were just not doing well.
If you thought it was a hotter than normal summer, you wouldn't be wrong, as temperatures were up across the board. And with La Nina officially here, it's a pattern that will likely continue in the coming year. That could bring with it altered farming practices and different types of crops.
There are a number of different things that farmers are doing, changing the way that they manage their crops, changing the way that they have workers work, and looking at the livestock and making sure that they can handle those changes in temperature. They're also introducing some new crops, things like satsumas and olives. And so those are crops that are a little bit more tropical. They can handle warm temperatures. They like warm temperatures better.
Higher humidity is also in the forecast, which means growers should plan accordingly.
And so our humidity levels are going up. Well, that causes some problems because it's more likely we'll see fungal diseases. And so you might have to change the way you plant things so that there's more ventilation through the canopy of different crops that you're growing to help reduce the amount of fungal diseases. Or you might have to change the kind of chemicals you use and how often you apply them.
As for the big piece of advice for farmers, if it is in fact a hot, dry growing season,
with drier conditions, whatever irrigation you can get is probably going to be a good thing. A lot of years, you don't really need that much irrigation. You may only need 4 inches, but you have to put it on at the right time. And so even for smaller farmers, if you can find a way to use a farm pond or something like that, that can help to get your crops through those dry spells.
Reporting from Watkinsville, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
Election 2024 is behind us, and now some new faces are taking over leadership on the House and Senate Ag Committees. Sam Kiefer, Vice President of Public Policy for American Farm Bureau Federation, says the 4 leaders of those committees have a wealth of experience.
The House Ag Committee chairman is Glenn G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. He's well established. New ranking committee member Angie Craig from Minnesota, new but not inexperienced. On the Senate side, John Bozeman from Arkansas takes over as the committee chairman. He's been serving as the leading Republican for a while. And joining him from the other side of the aisle is Senator Amy Klobuchar from the Democrats. Again, new to her post, not new to Congress, not new to the Ag Committee. They need to get back to the business of doing a farm bill. We've been kicking the can down the road for the better part of 2 years. Congress also has to deal with expiring tax provisions before the end of 2025. Not to mention there's a number of regulatory oversight opportunities for members of Congress. They also need to figure out the budget, and the current budget only goes until March.
Of course, Georgia's fruit and vegetable producers are always looking for ways to improve their operations and remain sustainable in an ever-evolving industry.
And as John Holcomb tells us, there's one event every year where they can achieve that and make some new contacts in the process.
Fruit and vegetable growers from all over the Southeast made their way to the annual Southeast Regional Fruit and Vegetable Conference, an event that's meant to equip producers within the industry with all of the tools and knowledge that they need to see success back on their operations and remain sustainable for years to come.
There is an intrinsic value in coming together and visiting with old friends and strengthening those existing relationships. Those matter. Because in these tough times, those are the people that you can count on. So it's great just to bring everybody together in the same room. It's also great to bring everybody together to get them up to date on rules for compliance on things like the H-2A labor program, pesticide regulations, and other regulations. They face a whole host of agencies that are worried about what's going on the farms, and we need to make sure that we're providing them the correct information to stay on the right side of compliance.
Compliance, of course, a huge topic of concern for growers as they adapt to changing herbicide requirements as the EPA works to develop a framework to ensure growers and producers are applying herbicides in a way that is on target and adheres to the Endangered Species Act, one of which has to do with mitigating surface runoff.
We will have specific mitigation requirements to prevent the pesticide from leaving the field through runoff. And we will be given certain points on a herbicide label that we must meet. For example, I'll give you an example. There's a product out now called Liberty Ultra. It's the first real example, and it has 3 points for runoff. So me as a grower, to apply that product, I have to achieve 3 points in mitigation measures on my field to be able to use that product. So we have this new restriction, but we also are providing the mitigation measures, right? It's not just 1 or 2 measures. There are a bunch of measures to help ensure the product stays on target.
Culpeper says they also have specific requirements when it pertains to mitigating particle drift, which again is meant to ensure producers are remaining on target when using.
There are certain measures that we can do as applicators to make sure it goes on target. Just to give you an example, if we're 24 inches above the target versus 48 inches above the target, we cut off target or drift movement by 50% just from that one measure, right? And they developed a credit system where we can reduce buffers. And again, each time we implement one of these measures that I promise are science-based, you're doing a better job.
Culpeper says that growers shouldn't be worried about this right now, as this is the time to become educated. However, he believes growers need to be engaged with this process as much as possible.
We've been working on this for 3 to 5 years. We have a lot of growers in the state of Georgia that have monumentally changed where we're at on the Endangered Species Act today versus 2 years ago. And I am not kidding. When I tell you what was proposed 2 years ago, we wouldn't have a farm left. We would not have a farm left. If it was not the engagement from our agricultural community, including our farmers, we would not be at a place we're at today where I think, working together with a little time, we will not only overcome these challenges, we will be better for putting the product on target, keeping it there. And keep in mind, long term, everybody knows what's happening in our country, but long term, if we cannot make sure these products go exactly where they need to go and they stay there, you're not going to have them.
Reporting in Savannah for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
Hey everybody, Ranger Nick. Coming up after the break, I'm hanging out with a logger on the inside of that machine over there who's grading these logs to determine where they go and why after the break. Holding a juvenile Juro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious. Well, you know I'm a talker. If you've watched us long enough, you know that I love to talk to folks. And can you envision me driving down the road by a logging operation and wanting to get out and interview and talk to a logger? Well, I'm doing it today. And I happen to be spending some time with Harry Sanders. Hey, Harry.
Hey, how are you doing,
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I love the hard hat, University of Georgia. Proud Warnell alum, distinguished alumni, Harry Sanders, Sanders Logging. We're standing out here on a logging operation. Harry, I gotta ask you the question. I'm looking at this beautiful piece of equipment, and I know we're gonna spend a little time with it here in just a minute. But
yes, sir.
People that are driving by out on the road may not realize that your day starts 3 o'clock in the morning, you said?
Yes, sir. The alarm clock goes off at 3 o'clock every morning.
And you pop right out of bed and you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
And one of the things I want the folks at home to learn today in this segment is the things that are going on before the sun comes up, before these gentlemen are working this equipment. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about what's going on in those wee hours of the morning as this team is preparing to harvest timber.
Well, the biggest thing about Sanders Logging that I'll say is the people that work for us. There's a communication aspect of it that a lot of people don't understand. So a lot of times when we're getting up, getting ready, and getting out of the house and getting in the trucks with, you know, technology like Bluetooth or the Bluetooth headsets and such, we all start getting on the phone with one another and start talking to each other on the way to work. You know, whether it's the truck drivers that are headed to the woods or to the mill that have been loaded from the day before, or it's the operators like myself and a lot of the guys that work with us that, you know, that are all talking on the way to the woods and, you know, just trying to keeping everybody accountable first thing in the morning.
And getting everybody ready and that teamwork and then the choreography, literally that word, I love that has to go on out here. You and I talked before we were on camera about this might look boring to somebody.
That's right.
And it's because there's so much good communication.
That's right.
Getting these folks moving around safely.
That's right. So it's all one big rhythm, and when it's all working together, it sounds like a symphony, right?
I love it. Yeah.
So that's the way that I kind of explain to people is, you know, when it is all working together, it may look a little boring, but that's when it's all finely tuned and it's well oiled and greased and it's just working together.
Okay, so we're up here on the Tiger Cat, and Harry is going to show us how you're processing this wood. Harry, why is it that these logs are in different piles?
Well, to start off with, each pile has a different dimension and specification that goes to different mills. So with the job that we're on right now, we have a pulpwood sort that's going to go to the paper mill to make fluff pulp for baby diapers and such.
Okay.
And then we've got a sort for the sawmills that's going to make dimensional lumber. And we also have a sort called light poles, and that's what the name says. Those are going to the mills to make the light poles with the light lines that you see every day. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab a tree, and we're going to look at it. And I have determined that I believe this tree is going to be a piece of saw timber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to use that pull-through delimber, and it's going to strip all the limbs off with the knives that's on it.
Wow.
And then I'm going to pull it through and pull it to a certain spot where the knots are not on the tree. And I cut the end of it off with it. And then I'm going to pick it up and put it in a pile. And this pile right here is going to go to the sawmills right here.
And you're going to do that, you and your operators are doing that, and they're making these decisions so quickly as to picking up each tree. See, this is the stuff I don't think that folks driving by out on the road realize. These logs are in different piles, and they're being graded by this operator. It's incredible stuff. And Harry, what I want to do next is I want to talk with a Sustainable Forestry Initiative professional and learn about your UGA connection to all this and how that professional development works. So let's head over there next.
Sounds good.
So I'm at another part of the logging operation in an area that looks like just a bunch of matted down pine needles and limbs. And I met up with my friend David James. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Nick.
Good to see you today.
Glad to be here, sir.
Hey, talking about UGA, David is our Sustainable Forestry Initiative Program Coordinator in the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources.
That's correct.
And SFI, Sustainable Forestry Initiative, is a logo, something that folks at home I know have seen in the grocery store on the back of a spiral notebook. I know you've seen this. Look in a minute and see if you can find one. But David, what does this mean to you? What we're looking at here, these matted down needles and limbs, what about this is so special?
Yeah, well, to the untrained eye, it just looks like forest debris that originates at the logging deck when the trees are topped and limbed. And the grapple skidder will grab wads of this and bring it back out to the trail and distribute it across the site, but primarily across this skid trail in order to stabilize the soil. And it'd be gathered up and placed in a low spot just like this so that these soils don't wash away, because the number one priority of logging and harvesting operations is to conserve the soil, keep it where it's at, because that's the base for the next crop.
And when we talk about crops, usually in ag, we talk about crops harvested every year. We're talking about 20, 30 years sometimes on this crop.
Long
really
rotations.
Gotta take care of this.
Yes, and this will shore up the soil just long enough for the earth to recover, because then the species on the forest floor are going to grow back eventually.
I can't thank you enough, David. Thank you so much. Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
It's a pleasure to have y'all.
We got to thank you. We got to thank Harry. We got to thank Aaron Lincoln that set all this stuff up for us. And until next time, for the Farm Monitor, David, as I always say, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you that enthusiasm is contagious. So pass it on. Y'all, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here again, this time next month. See ya. Holding a juvenile Duro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious.
After the break, we're headed to Athens, where UGA researchers are unlocking the secrets of your soil. Find out how their cutting-edge testing methods are helping improve farmers' yields, right down to the science of each nutrient.
The dairy industry anticipates a period of optimism and opportunity, despite broader struggles for ag markets. Dan Bossy, president of AgResource Company, says while crops like corn, wheat, and soybeans face lower margins, dairy is positioned for growth.
U.S. farm income will be down somewhere in the vicinity of $42 billion, which is the largest drop in farm income over a 2-year period on record. And so the U.S. farmer, in a general sense, is struggling, though the dairy industry is doing a little better relative to the milk market.
One of the driving factors behind the optimism is the record-breaking $8 billion being invested into the U.S. dairy processing industry. The unprecedented expansion is expected to bolster demand for milk.
We see Class 3 prices holding well above 18 or 19 for the extended range, and I think this is going to bode well for the U.S. dairy industry. For the 85 to 88% of the dairy industry, its break-even cost is somewhere around $17.20, and that tells me that we're making money today.
While global demand for dairy rises, Bossy points out that U.S. dairy producers are in a unique position. With little to no expansion anticipated in Europe, the U.S. is set to fill the void.
If the world continues to see more demand for, let's say, butterfat in terms of cheese and butter itself, we are relatively optimistic for the next 2 to 5 years on the U.S. dairy industry, because it is the one place where we need to see additional supply and export demand.
The beef on dairy trend is another bright spot. With limited feeder cattle supplies, prices are projected to hit all-time highs by next year, and crossbred calves are becoming an increasingly beneficial option for dairy producers.
I think the dairy industry provides that future opportunity of using maybe 1 million animals a year of beef on dairy that we'll have to continue to supply, because I just don't think the beef cow herd will be coming along fast enough.
While the dairy industry landscape evolves, producers are advised to assess their herds and focus on long-term productivity and growth opportunities. For Holstein Association USA, I'm Bob Cervera.
Finally this week, the soil testing lab at the University of Georgia is always buzzing with activity. They receive soil samples from all over the Southeast, but during their busiest time, November to April, they analyze nearly 900 samples a day. Here's now a closer look at this incredible, efficient operation.
Here at the Agricultural and Environmental Services Labs, we provide a lot of testing, but one of the foundations of what we do is testing soils for nutrient concentrations.
Daniel Jackson, research coordinator at the University of Georgia's Ag Environmental Services Lab, says the soil looks very different depending on which part of the state it's from.
And you can see the diversity of soils across the state. You can see the coastal plains and the sandier, darker soils down here, the more clayey soils up in the Piedmont.
Every crop requires a specific amount of potassium, phosphorus, and other nutrients. By testing the soil, you're able to get precise recommendations to make your soil even better.
This is just soil samples that we have received today. Each of these sets holds roughly about 36 samples.
Stephen Floyd, laboratory manager for the Soil, Plant, and Water Lab at UGA, says before they leave the lab for the day, they load up the dryer with soil samples.
And over here, I'm just going to cut it on. And right now, we're sitting at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. This guy, in probably about 30-45 minutes, is going to warm up and be right at the 110.
In the morning, they remove the samples from the dryer.
Oh yeah, these sets are good and dry.
Then they match up the samples with the paperwork on file.
Okay, everything matches up really well.
In the lab, they do everything alphabetically and by color.
For routine soil samples, like these are right here, they're just going to get malic, which is the minerals, and it's going to get pH, which is just going to give you your pH of your soil. All we're going to do is call them a routine, which we use black Sharpie.
For special soil tests, they use red, and for research purposes, they use green. From here, the samples go into the grinding room. Not every sample needs to be ground, but every sample does need to be sifted down, so everything is homogenized.
So all I'm doing, again, shaking out as much as I can, and then I'm going to dump out. So what you're going to get is initially that soil sample looked a little bit like this, all those chunks, and now it's perfectly homogenized. This we can work with.
Some samples require the grinder.
Cut this guy on, put it through the grinder. Once we're done in this room, we're actually going to take it to our extraction room. Now this is where a lot of the hard work goes into it.
They start with malic, or testing the mineral content of the soil.
And I like to use one of these spoons right here just to make sure we get a level sample. And we're just going to dump it into that cell right there. Now this is where time becomes a factor. This is malic solution right here. The malic solution is essentially very distilled, very diluted, acid. We use about 20 liters of DI water, and then we put about 160 mils of hydrochloric and about 25 mils of sulfuric acid, and that's what makes malic one solution. We also shake that up, and we also get a good pH value. I'm just adding 20 mils of solution into each vessel.
Then the samples go to the shaker.
Now what this shaker is going to do is actually agitate all the soil samples and just really mix everything up very well. And we're only going to do this for 5 minutes.
Once the samples come out of the shaker, they're poured into a filter.
So all this is doing is actually stripping any and all the soil out. So what we want is just the liquid.
Once they get the extracts, they bring them into this room.
And we load them onto our ICP auto sampler. As the solution goes into the machine, it hits the flame, it actually creates ions, which each element, potassium, calcium, whatever, has a specific color of light that it produces. When it hits the flame, it produces a specific color of light. The machine is going to detect that light and determine the overall amount of that specific element.
As the machine analyzes the samples, all the data gets recorded into the computer and uploaded into their system to determine a fertilizer recommendation.
We hold ourselves to very high standards, and we do our due diligence as far as turning out the best possible result to the client, because we know these are valuable results.
By testing your soil, you're able to actually get precise recommendations about what is there and what you need to apply in order to maximize your yield and have the best farm operation.
Well, you hear that music. Unfortunately, that means we are out of time.
For Jennifer and everyone here at the show, I'm Ray DeLessio saying take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next week for another Farm Monitor. Thanks for watching.